Everything you've been told about death is wrong. It's not the end. It's not a void. And it's far more than a mystery left to faith or guesswork. For over 1,000 years, a powerful truth has been hidden, locked within the pages of a once forbidden manuscript. This ancient guide, known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, reveals what truly unfolds in the 49 days after death, once kept only for the most awakened souls, those ready to face truth without fear. This sacred text tells you something extraordinary. Death isn't your final breath, it's your greatest test. A test that determines if you'll finally break free from the endless cycle of life and death, or fall back into it lost, confused, and unaware. Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because no one ever told them what to expect. They don't see through the illusions. They don't realize that everything they hear, see, or feel after death is a mirror of their own mind. And by the time they awaken to that truth, it's too late. But if this ancient wisdom is true, then what happens after death may matter even more than the life you've just lived. And it all begins with one powerful moment. The moment you step outside your body and everything changes. The moment you die, reality doesn't vanish. You don't disappear. You awaken, not to nothingness, but to something deeply profound. For over 1,000 years, ancient wisdom has spoken of this moment. A moment where you feel weightless, as if drifting outside a dream. No heartbeat, no breath, yet somehow, you're still aware. You know something has changed, but your mind, trained by a lifetime of physical experience, struggles to accept it. If you've ever had an out-of-body experience, it may feel strangely familiar. Only this time, there's no going back. And then, it happens. A radiant, blinding light, pure, infinite, so powerful that your very sense of self begins to dissolve into it. This is what the Tibetan Book of the Dead calls the clear light of reality. And in that moment, if you recognize it, if you surrender completely, you merge with it. You transcend the cycle of birth and death. You achieve instant enlightenment, free from reincarnation forever. This is the ultimate liberation. And it happens the moment you die. But almost no one sees it. Why? Because we've been conditioned to fear the unknown. The soul panics. It clings to identity, to memories, to desires left unfinished. And instead of embracing the light, it pulls away. That's when the illusions begin. You'll hear sounds, whispers, echoes of familiar voices. Familiar, but distorted, like they're calling from behind a veil. The world around you shifts. The light fades, and forms begin to appear. Shadows, places, people. But none of it is real. Not yet. Your mind is searching for meaning. And in that desperate search, it creates the very reality that shapes what comes next. This is where most souls lose their way. They don't see death as liberation. They fall into confusion, longing for comfort, for familiarity. And the mind obliges, recreating the world they left behind. Familiar voices, cherished faces, even religious icons. But these too are illusions, projections of your own subconscious. If only they knew that none of it is real, that they are being tested, they could let go. They could be free. But instead, they follow these visions deeper into the Bardo, the mysterious in-between realm, a place between death and rebirth. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that awareness is the key. Those who are prepared, those who recognize the illusions, they can pass through, they can break free. But for the unprepared, for those still clinging to what was, what comes next is unavoidable. They will journey through 49 days of visions, some divine, others terrifying, all designed to test the soul, to guide them toward awakening, or back into the wheel of rebirth. You are now in the Bardo, the space between life and the next existence. Time no longer flows as it once did. What seemed like seconds now stretches into eternity, and what felt like days can pass in the blink of an eye. You have no body, no voice, only awareness. But here's the problem. Most people don't realize they've died. They're trapped in a dreamlike state, clinging to the echoes of their past life, unable to accept that everything they once knew is gone. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the Bardo as a realm in flux, a place where reality bends, twists, and warps, where thoughts materialize into things, and where the mind itself creates the experience. Every fear, every desire, every hidden emotion that was buried in life, it all takes form here. The journey through the Bardo lasts 49 days. a process that unfolds in stages. And for most, it's terrifying. In the beginning, there's confusion. The soul tries to return home, to its family, its loved ones. It lingers around familiar places, trying to speak, trying to be seen, but no one hears. No one responds. And the realization begins to settle in. This is not a dream. This is death. But even then, the mind resists. It clings to its identity, refusing to accept the inevitable. It seeks comfort, logic, any explanation to hold on to. But the Bardo doesn't offer comfort. It's not a place of rest. It's a place of transition, where the soul must confront itself in its purest form. At first, the experience feels neutral, even peaceful. There is no physical pain, no suffering, only awareness. Some describe it as floating through a vast, formless space, a void where thoughts ripple out like waves on an infinite ocean. Then, visions begin to emerge. The first visions are gentle and welcoming. Beautiful, radiant beings appear, what some may interpret as angels, enlightened masters, or divine guides. These figures radiate warmth, wisdom, and peace. They offer a way out, a path to transcendence. But the soul must recognize them for what they are, reflections of its own higher consciousness. If the soul understands this, it can merge with them, dissolving into higher awareness, escaping the cycle of reincarnation forever. But most souls hesitate, they doubt, and that hesitation is enough. The visions change, the radiant beings fade, and in their place, shadows emerge. The once peaceful forms grow distorted, faces shift into grotesque expressions. The soothing voices become whispers of fear and doubt. What was once a paradise begins to twist into something darker. This is the next stage of the Bardo, the test of illusions. These figures are not demons. They are not punishments. They are projections of the soul's own mind, its regrets, its guilt, its unprocessed fears, a mirror that reflects everything the soul refuses to face. And for most souls, that reflection is unbearable. The real test is about to begin. What the soul sees next will determine its fate. At first, the visions are divine. The soul sees celestial landscapes, radiant light, and beings of pure compassion. These luminous figures don't speak in words, but their presence radiates an overwhelming sense of peace. Some who've experienced near-death states describe them as angels, enlightened masters, or even gods. But in truth, they are neither saviors nor judges. They are manifestations of the soul's highest potential, reflecting the light of its purest state. If the soul recognizes them for what they truly are, it can transcend. But recognition requires clarity, and clarity is hard to come by when the mind is clouded by fear. For those who spent their lives chasing desires, fearing death, or clinging to identity, the illusions begin to distort. The radiant beings remain, but their forms start to flicker, twisting in and out of shapes, as if reality itself is beginning to unravel. Then, just as quickly as they appeared, the luminous beings fade, and in their place, the wrathful visions emerge. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes this moment in disturbing detail. As the days pass in the Bardo, the comforting figures vanish, replaced by dark, monstrous entities. These beings are terrifying, beyond anything the soul has ever encountered. They roar with inhuman voices, their faces twisted in expressions of rage and chaos. Some have multiple heads, countless arms, or eyes that burn like fire. They appear as demons, executioners, or relentless pursuers, striking terror into the heart of the unprepared soul. This is where most souls panic. They run, they plead, they scream, but there is no escape, because there is nothing to escape from. These terrifying figures are not real enemies. They do not exist outside the mind. They are projections of the soul's unresolved fears, hidden guilt, buried regrets. Every moment of deception, cruelty, or selfishness from the past life takes form in the Bardo, appearing as something external, something attacking. But the truth is, the attack is self-created. The horror is self-inflicted. And the most dangerous part is this: the more the soul fights, the stronger the visions become. Fear fuels the illusion. Terror gives it power. The only way to escape is not to run, but to recognize. Those who realize the truth, that these entities are nothing more than shadows of the mind, watch them dissolve instantly, like mist burned away by the sun. The illusions vanish the moment the soul stops believing in them. But almost no one understands this in time. They see only the nightmare, not the lesson hidden within it. This is the second major test of the afterlife. The first was recognizing the clear light, a test of awareness. This is the second, recognizing the illusions of fear, a test of self-mastery. Those who fail this test are dragged deeper into the Bardo, descending further into the cycle of karma, unable to break free. For the majority, the terror lasts for weeks. By the third or fourth week, the soul faces its next challenge, a full review of its past life. And this time, there's nowhere to hide. There is no judge, no divine courtroom, no higher being deciding your fate. What happens next is far more profound and far more terrifying. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes it as the Great Mirror, a moment when the soul is forced to confront the full weight of its existence. At first, it feels as though nothing is happening. The wrathful illusions begin to fade, and for a brief moment, the soul may feel as though it has escaped. But then, something else takes hold. A new experience. More vivid, more intense. It is not a vision. It is not a dream. It is reliving. The soul is pulled backward through time, through every action, every thought, every emotion it ever created. But this is not memory. This is full immersion. The soul doesn't just remember what it did in life. It experiences it all over again. Every moment of kindness, every act of cruelty, every decision made in secret is now felt, not only from its own perspective, but from the perspective of everyone it ever affected. If you caused pain, you will feel that pain. If you brought joy, you will feel that joy. But there is no filter, no way to justify or excuse past choices. Everything is raw, immediate, undeniable. This is not punishment. It is truth. The soul is not being judged by some external force. It is judging itself. The Tibetan texts explain that for most, this experience is agonizing. We spend our lives avoiding responsibility, justifying our mistakes, burying our guilt. But in death, there is nowhere to hide. You do not get to explain why you acted the way you did. You don't get to argue, deflect, or reason your way out of it. You only get to feel. For some, this experience is blissful. Those who lived with compassion, honesty, and wisdom are flooded with peace, as every positive action returns to them like waves of light. But for others, it is a torment beyond anything they could have imagined. Not because they are being punished, but because the weight of their own actions crashes down upon them. This is the reckoning, and it is unavoidable. But here's where it gets even more shocking. According to the Tibetan teachings, this life review does not just affect the past. It also determines the future. By the time the soul has relived its entire existence, it is no longer neutral. It is deeply conditioned by the emotions it has just re-experienced. If the soul emerges from this review filled with guilt, regret, or attachment, it will be drawn back into the cycle of reincarnation. The heavier the burden, the lower the realm it will return to. Some souls are reborn into suffering, into poverty, into struggle, not because of external judgment, but because their own mindset pulls them toward it. The soul is choosing, without even realizing it. This is why the life review is not just a reflection. It is a test to see if the soul can let go, if it can accept its past without attachment, if it can release the burden of regret, fear, and unfinished desires. Those who pass this test move toward liberation. Those who fail are pulled back into another life, another body, another cycle of struggle. This is why spiritual traditions emphasize preparing for death long before it arrives. Because when the moment comes, when the great mirror is placed in front of you, what you see is no longer within your control. It has already been written by the life you lived. By the fourth or fifth week in the Bardo, the final test begins. The soul now faces its ultimate choice: to break free or to be reborn. The Bardo is almost over. The illusions have played their tricks. The soul has faced its past, relived every joy, every sorrow, every hidden thought that shaped its existence. Now, after weeks of drifting through the in-between, the moment of decision has arrived. This is the final test, the one that will determine everything. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this stage is described as the most crucial and the most difficult of all. The soul now stands at a crossroads. It must make a choice: either recognize the illusions and break free forever, or fall back into the cycle of reincarnation, a cycle of endless rebirth. But here's the problem. Most souls don't even realize they are making a choice. By this point, the illusions have become so overwhelming, so convincing, that the soul barely remembers it is in the Bardo at all. The visions now take on a new form, one that feels completely different from everything before. They are no longer terrifying deities or fragmented hallucinations. Instead, they become familiar, comforting, tempting. The Book of the Dead warns that in these final days, the soul will be offered a way out, but it's a trap. Visions of loved ones will appear, calling it back. Familiar places will show up, drawing the soul in with warmth and nostalgia. The soul feels a deep longing, a pull towards something recognizable. But these aren't just hallucinations. They are glimpses of the next life the soul is about to enter. The karmic forces have already begun shaping the soul's return, weaving the conditions for its next incarnation. If the soul clings to these visions, if it allows itself to be pulled in, it is instantly swept into a new body, a new life. The cycle of forgetting begins again. Rebirth happens automatically. The moment the soul latches onto a desire, a fear, or an attachment, it is pulled into a new womb, a new reality, with no memory of the choice it just made. The Book of the Dead describes this as a moment of deep forgetfulness, where the past life dissolves, and a new one begins. It is like waking from a dream, with no recollection of where you just came from. And so, the cycle begins again. Birth, suffering, death, and another return to the Bardo. But for the few who are prepared, the final test is different. Those who understand what is happening, who see through the illusions, they recognize the visions for what they are, mere projections, tricks of the mind designed to keep them trapped. They do not cling to the comfort of past attachments, nor do they recoil in fear. They remain still, aware, detached, and in that moment, something incredible happens. The illusions collapse, the karmic forces lose their grip, the pull toward rebirth fades, and the soul, free from attachment, free from fear, transcends the cycle completely. This is what the Tibetan masters call liberation. It is not a place, not a heaven, not an afterlife in the way most people think of it. It is simply awakening to what was always there, a state beyond illusion, beyond duality, beyond suffering. But almost no one reaches this state. Why? Because to do so requires something that most people never prepare for. Awareness at the moment of death. The ability to recognize the trap before it closes. And this is why, for over 1,000 years, these teachings were hidden. Because if people truly understood the truth about death, it would change everything. The next stage of this journey isn't just about what happens after death. It's about why this knowledge was forbidden for centuries. For over 1,000 years, these teachings were locked away, reserved only for the most advanced spiritual practitioners, hidden from the masses, censored by religious institutions. Even today, most people have never heard of them. And there's a reason for that. The Tibetan Book of the Dead was never meant for the ordinary mind. It was considered too powerful, too dangerous, for those who were unprepared. Because if people truly understood what happens after death, it would shatter everything. Their beliefs, their fears, their entire perception of reality. Think about it. If death is not an end, if it's not a punishment, if there's no divine judgment, then what happens to the control systems built on those very ideas? Religions would crumble, governments would lose power, society, as we know it, would unravel. For centuries, religious institutions have preached about heaven and hell, about divine punishment, and the need to obey higher authorities to secure a place in the afterlife. These narratives serve one key purpose: control. If people believe that an external force dictates their fate after death, they will follow, they will conform, they will fear. But what if the truth is that no one is judging you but yourself? That the afterlife isn't about punishment or reward, but simply your own mind reflecting back at you. This knowledge was kept hidden, because it would destroy the very foundation of salvation through external sources. It would force people to accept something far more terrifying, that they are fully responsible for their own fate. And that's not all. Modern science is starting to confirm aspects of these ancient teachings. Near-death experiences and NDS are filled with eerily similar descriptions. People report seeing the clear light, encounters with their life review, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace or fear, all dependent on their actions in life. Even cutting-edge quantum physics is starting to suggest that consciousness is not confined to the brain. that it may persist beyond death, and may even operate outside the limits of time and space. For centuries, this knowledge was dismissed as superstition, but now, the lines between ancient wisdom and modern science are starting to blur. So, why don't more people know about this? Because the system is designed to keep you distracted. It keeps you focused on the material world, on temporary pleasures, on meaningless fears. It keeps you chasing money, status, and validation, so that by the time death arrives, you are completely unprepared. The biggest lie ever told about death is that it's a mystery. It's not. The Tibetan masters mapped it out over 1,000 years ago. They understood that the first 49 days after death follow a precise structure, that the mind shapes its own afterlife, that awareness is the only key to freedom. Yet almost no one is preparing for it, because the real secret is this: if you are not conscious in life, you will not be conscious in death, and that means the cycle will repeat over and over again. But for those who understand the truth, for those who begin preparing now, there's another way. What comes next is even more important. If this knowledge is real, then the next question isn't just about what happens after death. It's about whether we're failing the test entirely. If the Tibetan Book of the Dead is right, then most of us are already doomed to repeat the cycle. Not because we are weak, not because we are unworthy, but because we are completely unprepared. Look around. How many people spend their lives even thinking about death, let alone preparing for it? Society has conditioned us to fear it, ignore it, and pretend it doesn't exist. We distract ourselves with work, entertainment, money, and meaningless pleasures, all while knowing that one day, our time will come, and when it does, we will be as lost as the billions before us, blinded, confused, and caught in the same trap. Because the real test doesn't happen after death, it's happening right now. The Bardo is not just a place in the afterlife. It is a state of mind. The same illusions that deceive the soul after death are already deceiving us in life. The fear that keeps souls running from the wrathful visions, it's the same fear that controls people every day. The attachment that pulls souls back into reincarnation, it's the same attachment that keeps people chasing money, fame, and temporary pleasures. The inability to recognize illusions, it's the same blindness that keeps people believing everything they're told, never questioning the reality in front of them. If you are not conscious now, you will not be conscious after death. This is why so few people escape. The Book of the Dead teaches that the same habits, fears, and desires that shape our daily lives also shape what happens after we die. Those who live in ignorance die in ignorance. Those controlled by fear in life will be controlled by fear in death. And those who live chasing illusions will continue chasing them after their body is gone. The cycle is relentless. It is perfectly designed to keep us trapped. And the worst part is, we are doing it to ourselves. But here's the truth most will never understand. The cycle is not unbreakable. The Tibetan masters left behind these teachings for a reason, so that the few who are ready can wake up. The first step is to see reality for what it really is. Most people will continue living the way they always have. They will tell themselves they have time, that they will think about death later, that right now, there are more important things to focus on. And then, in an instant, their life will be over. They will enter the Bardo, just as lost, just as confused, as every soul before them. But for those who wake up now, who begin to break the cycle before it's too late, everything changes. Because preparation does not happen after death. It happens while you are still here. And that preparation is not about religion, dogma, or rituals. It is about awareness, about seeing the illusions for what they are, about breaking free from the fears, desires, and false identities that keep us trapped. Not just in this life, but in the next. The question is no longer, what happens after death? The real question is, are we already dead? Most will move on and forget what they've just learned. They'll return to their distractions, routines, and programmed existence. But the few who understand will know, this moment is a turning point. And now, the question becomes even more urgent. If the way we live determines what happens when we die, then how do we prepare? How do we escape the cycle before it's too late? The answer is simpler than you think. If death is a test, then life is the study guide. But the problem is, most people don't even know they're being tested. They live as if life is endless, as if death is some distant event that won't come for a long time. And then, one day, it does. The Tibetan masters taught that the only way to be conscious in death is to be conscious in life. If you spend your life running from reality, distracting yourself with temporary pleasures, and avoiding deep self-reflection, then when the moment comes, you will be completely unprepared. You will cling to your identity, to your fears, to your regrets, and in doing so, you will be pulled back into the cycle, lost in illusion once again. But there is another way. The first step to preparing for death is detachment, not in the sense of rejecting life, but in the sense of not being controlled by it. Most people are enslaved by their desires. They chase money, validation, status, relationships, thinking these things will bring happiness. But in the Bardo, none of it matters. The only thing that determines your fate is the state of your consciousness. The more attached you are to the material world, the harder it will be to let go. And the harder it is to let go, the more likely you are to be reborn into another life of struggle, another cycle of forgetting. Detachment does not mean giving up everything and living in isolation. It means mastering your mind, learning to control your thoughts instead of letting them control you. It means understanding that nothing in this world is permanent. Not your body, not your possessions, not even your identity. Once you truly grasp this, you will stop fearing death. The second step is awareness. The Bardo is a realm of illusions, but so is life. Right now, everything you see, everything you believe, is a projection of your mind, shaped by conditioning, fears, and external influences. If you do not learn to see through the illusions now, you will not see through them in death. Meditation, self-inquiry, and deep reflection are the keys to breaking free, not as religious practices, but as training for the final test. In the same way an athlete trains their body before competition, your mind must be trained before it faces the afterlife. Because in that moment, your thoughts become your reality. If you have spent your life reacting with fear, doubt, and confusion, that is exactly what will consume you in death. But if you have spent your life cultivating clarity, presence, and detachment, then in the Bardo, you will recognize the illusions for what they are. You will not run. You will not cling. You will remain still, aware, and free. And that is the difference between those who escape and those who remain trapped. The third and final step is acceptance. Death is not something to be feared, nor is it something to avoid thinking about. It is the most important moment of your existence, the moment when everything is revealed. If you live in fear of death, you will be ruled by fear in the afterlife. But if you embrace it as the natural transition that it is, you will approach it with peace instead of panic. The ancient masters spent their lives preparing for this moment, not because they were obsessed with death, but because they understood that life and death are the same thing. One cannot be mastered without the other. And that is why modern society keeps people distracted. Because a world full of people who do not fear death is a world full of people who cannot be controlled. If you understand this, then you are already different from most. You are already waking up. But there is still one more truth you must know. Because everything we've discussed, everything about the Bardo, about illusions, about breaking free, is meaningless unless you know this final secret. Most people will never prepare for death. They will live their lives blindly, consumed by distractions, chasing illusions, fearing what they do not understand. And when the moment comes, they will be thrown into the Bardo, confused, lost, and unprepared, just as they were in life. But here's the final truth. Death does not change you. It only reveals you. The Tibetan Book of the Dead does not describe an afterlife in the way most people think. It does not promise a paradise for the good, nor a hell for the wicked. It does not place judgment on anyone. The Bardo is not an external place. It is the mirror of your own consciousness. Everything you will experience after death, the clear light, the peaceful deities, the terrifying illusions, the life review, and the pull toward reincarnation, is nothing but a reflection of the mind you carried in life. If you lived in fear, you will die in fear. If you lived in attachment, you will die clinging to what is already gone. If you lived in conscious, you will drift through the afterlife, reacting, grasping, falling back into the cycle. But if you lived with awareness, if you trained your mind to see through illusion, if you prepared yourself while still alive, then in death, you will recognize the Bardo for what it is: a test, a transition, an opportunity And that is the secret hidden for over 1,000 years. The reason these teachings were forbidden, because if people knew the truth, they would stop fearing death. They would stop wasting their lives on things that do not matter. They would stop being controlled by false beliefs, by religious institutions, by governments that use fear to keep them obedient. A person who understands death is a person who cannot be manipulated. Once you see the truth, once you understand that this life is only preparation for the next, everything changes. The way you think changes. The way you act changes. You no longer chase temporary pleasures or meaningless distractions. You no longer fear loss, because you know nothing was ever yours to begin with. You no longer cling to identity, because you realize it was never real. And when the moment comes, when you take your last breath and cross the threshold, you will not panic. You will not grasp. You will not be pulled back into the cycle of forgetting. You will simply be aware. And in that awareness, you will have a choice, a real choice, to break free or to return. Most will never reach this point. They will move on from this video, return to their routines, forget everything they have just learned. And when the moment comes, they will be unprepared. But you don't have to be. If you've made it this far, then you are already different from most. You are already seeking. But everything you've just learned is useless unless you understand this final truth. A truth that has been hidden in secret government documents. A truth that reveals exactly what happens after death in ways even the Tibetan Book of the Dead could not describe. Click on the video you see right here to discover what they never wanted you to know. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting 100%.